This is so irritating. So I just checked and saw that y'all can see it, even though it's frozen on your end, like it'll save under my live. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and answer the last bit of questions, even though not many of y'all are here anymore. And so yeah, y'all can watch these in hi. Oh, it's working. Hello. Technology. Thank you. So and it's working. So yeah, I'm actually just to go ahead. I'll just answer the questions. I know not many folks are here anymore, but I do want to answer your questions and y'all can watch the like replay when you have time, when you're cooking, doing whatever you want to be doing. But I think the question I left off on was how do you plan and budget your trip? Sometimes it's just me swiping my card, not gonna lie. Other times I do try to go ahead and like um budget really like the main thing in my budgets that I'm willing to compromise is honestly accommodations. Like I normally travel solo, so I don't need much personally, but I would say a good like think about how much money you want to spend per meal and the places you want to go. I think that's a really good thing. Like some people know they spend like $50 for dinner and like maybe $10 for breakfast. Like I don't know what you're eating. So that's a good way to figure out your budget. But for me, I try at least now like I prefer my trips to be under like $2,000 because travel is just really expensive nowadays. So the days of like $1,000, $700 trips are over, unfortunately. But I really try to keep it under a certain amount. I would say 2,000, 2,500 for like a good trip is probably a reasonable budget, but also a lot of times I'm also staying somewhere longer term for like 2 weeks. So my budget is like a bit different for that too. So it really depends on the trip I'm taking, but I could probably do a whole video on like things to keep in mind for your travel. How many days for $2,000? It depends on how luxurious I'm trying to be. Um, I would say because most hotels I would say a whole I mean, 2,000 is like a longer trip, I would argue. Like I've done South Africa for like 3,000-ish dollars before, and that was 10 days. So like 2,000, I would say I'm at least there for like 4 days. Like I gotta be spending $2,000 or so, 4 or 5 days. I mean, maybe a week depending on the location. I think for money, it really depends on where I'm at and also like the dollar and like the conversion and like all that kind of stuff too. But I would say my train trips tend to be a bit more expensive than like regular solo trips because train travel is just generally more expensive. So that's a whole like yeah, budget is a whole thing. Maybe I'll do a longer video kind of going more into like how to design a budget because it's very especially nowadays with like inflation and the price and the cost of flights and stuff, like you really got to be careful out here. You could because you could spend 2,000 in a weekend nowadays, especially in the U.S. The U.S. is way more expensive to travel in than other countries. I love your vlogs. Thank you. How do you go about planning your itineraries? For example, your LA itinerary had you all over the city. How did you organize that? Yeah, and I had the Uber prices to show it because the Ubers in LA were expensive, honey. I have never paid that much in Uber. Never paid that much in Uber. I should really understand why y'all rent cars when you go to LA. So, yeah, I would say for me, my itineraries are generally around like Black history and food, if you couldn't tell. In the US, especially other places, it's definitely around food. I love planning trips around food. That's really what I plan most of my stuff around. But I research a lot. Like that was my job for 4.5 years, is like being a researcher. And I definitely use that skill a lot when I'm planning trips. So I'm in like Google, I'm in TikTok, I'm in Instagram. I am looking up stuff to do everywhere. I love following hyper local influencers. So, like, not people like me who kind of go everywhere, but influencers who just talk about like Los Angeles or influencers who like just talk about New Orleans. I love following them because they have very niche recommendations that I would never see on like a bigger influencer who does more international and domestic travel. So, definitely using social media to your advantage. TikTok has been a really great resource, so I'm kind of trying to figure out what's going to happen when they ban it and how people are going to plan their trips. But also Pinterest is a great resource. I do use like Lonely Planet and TripAdvisor too. I always read reviews. So like if I'm looking something up on Google reviews, I'm reading the reviews. Like Google Maps, I'm reading the reviews. Yeah, TripAdvisor, reading the reviews, all of it. So I do a lot of research to figure out where I want to go. And once I kind of compile all the things I want to do, then I figure out what neighborhoods they're in. And so like if it's all in one neighborhood, well, I'm gonna spend a day in that neighborhood, or afternoon in that neighborhood. Like for LA, I knew I wanted to go to Inglewood. So I spent a day in Inglewood. Like I didn't go from downtown LA to Inglewood and back because that's crazy Uber prices, but I spent a day in a neighborhood. So yeah, I think it's a new trend that they're calling nano neighborhoods, meaning like tourists go to a neighborhood and stay there and just like research things to do. So yeah, I often do that and search by neighborhoods. Do you practice conscious consumption as you travel? I try to. I know it's really hard. Like ethical tourism is getting even more harder with the commodity of like people just owning properties in countries they've never been to before and stuff like that. For accommodations, I find it's the hardest because to find a local accommodation before you go can be a bit difficult. So that's one thing, but I try to shop local. I love markets. I collect bags. If you couldn't tell, like a lot of these bags are from my trips. So if I am buying something, I like to buy from like a local boutique or a market. I love buying like earrings at markets. I got these in Kenya at like a little market. So yeah, I try to stay in sustainable places, but I will say that a lot of the sustainable places are like luxury and sometimes out of my price range. So I think accommodations again is the hardest, but I try not to have like plastic bottles and stuff like that. I use like filtered water, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm getting more into it, but it definitely takes a bit more time to travel a bit more sustainably. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that hard, but it is. But yeah, I try to really just shop local as much as I can, whether it's food, souvenirs, activities. Like I may look up stuff on like bigger travel planning websites, but sometimes I may try to find the actual website of that like tour group and book directly with them so that they don't have to pay the commission that they maybe pay to put it on somebody else's website like Airbnb experience, which I do love. And they do have like a lot of local guides on there, but I do know that Airbnb like takes a cut. So if you can find the actual website, you can also go and book there. Okay, those were like the general travel questions. And there were a lot of like, oh, we have one in the comment. Hi, Nikki. Any suggestions on train trips with teens? Oh, so I do see I see like a lot of younger kids on trains. I don't really travel with like my nieces or nephews. They're not teens yet. But I don't really travel with them often. But I would say like maybe try like a shorter ride. Like maybe if I don't know, Milwaukee to Chicago, then hanging out in Chicago is a cute one. LA to San Diego is a cute one. If you do want to do one of the longer long distance rides, pick the scenic segment, because teens have a short attention span. So you may want to pick the most scenic part of a train ride. So for example, the California Zephyr, that starts in Denver. And so you can go like Denver, maybe just through Colorado, and then that's the end of your train ride. So you could do that if you want to go with teens. I think teens would love like New York City to Niagara Falls. That was a really fun one that I did last summer. So yeah, that one was fun too. And it gives them tons to do once they get off the train. Like, I didn't realize Niagara Falls was like a touristy place for real. Like, it was like casinos and like